This system not only does not crown the best driver champion, it is the worst way to determine a champion in any major sporting organization ever.
You're completely wrong in so many ways.
Hey everyone, I'm Ben Schneider, and 3 years ago I uploaded a video called NASCAR Playoffs, the absolute worst way to determine a champion. And in that video, I made the argument that despite its uniqueness and entertainment value, the current elimination playoff format is not a good system because it does not always reward full season excellence. That's not to take anything away from Ryan Blaney. He did everything he needed to do under a system that's the same for everybody. He's a deserving champion. But you know what? 3 years later, I still stand by everything I said. Well, except for one thing. Because as the title implies, 3 years ago, I truly believed that the elimination playoff system was the absolute worst way to determine a champion. And today, I'm here to admit that I was wrong. It's not the absolute worst way to determine a champion, because after thinking about it, I've come to the conclusion that NASCAR's system for determining its champion in 1950 was even worse. How is this possible? Let's get into it. 1950 was the second season of what's now known as the NASCAR Cup Series. While there was no playoff system back then, the long-running standard point system created by Bob Blatford wouldn't be introduced until 1975, shortly after the start of NASCAR's modern era. Prior to the Blatford system, the amount of prize money available in the race purse actually determined how many points would be available at that race. Now, for most races, this didn't result in too much of a point swing, but there was one notable exception with a brand new race for the 1950 season, the Southern 500. To get a sense of just how much this skewed the point standings, Johnny Mantz won the inaugural Southern 500, and it was one of only 3 races in which he competed in 1950. Do you want to know where Mantz finished in the final standings? 6th. Yep, that's right. Johnny Mantz finished 6th in points in 1950, despite running just 3 races all season. And the Southern 500 was the only one of the 3 where he was even so much as running at the finish. Now, this much of a discrepancy in where points were being awarded is bad enough. But it's still not even the biggest reason why I find NASCAR's 1950 championship even more controversial and questionable than all of the playoff antics we've seen over the last 20 years combined. The 1950 championship was won by a driver named Bill Rexford. If Rexford's notable for anything besides winning this championship, it's for being the only Cup Series champion who isn't in the Hall of Fame, active, or recently retired and not yet Hall of Fame eligible. Not only was Rexford's win at Canfield Speedway the only race he won in the 1950 season, it was the only race win of his entire career. Now, one-win champions are rare, but hardly unprecedented, as Matt Kenseth proved in 2003. However, Rexford's points total should not have been enough to win the 1950 title, and that's because Lee Petty scored a total of 2,399 points during the season to Rexford's 1,959. So why didn't Petty win the championship? Well, as it turns out, Bill France wasn't a big fan of his drivers crossing over and taking part in other motorsports series. So when he heard that Petty had done so, taking part in a race promoted by Bruton Smith at Charlotte during a NASCAR off weekend, he slapped him with a massive penalty, taking away all 809 points he'd earned up to that point in the season. Yep, that's right. Big Bill France is so staunchly opposed to motorsports crossover that he all but ends a driver's shot at a championship just to make that point. This leaves Petty with just 1,590 points, still enough to finish 3rd in the final standings, and enough that had his points not been taken away, he would have clinched the championship easily. Now to be clear, just as I say about modern-day NASCAR champions in the playoff era, I don't hold any of this against Rexford. Because it's not like he chose the rules or the penalties or a point system that played to his advantage. But man, you thought the NASCAR playoffs were controversial? You thought Abu Dhabi 2021 had Formula One fans outraged? Can you imagine if NASCAR Twitter had been around to react to this in 1950? Or how they would react if something like this happened today? Hey, Kyle Larson, you're running the Indianapolis 500? Sorry, we have to take away all your points and you're not getting a playoff waiver. As for Rexford, while all the other Cup champions have made it, or are pretty much locks to make it one day, I do think he's only a borderline Hall of Famer at best. But then again, NASCAR legend Ned Jarrett is on record saying he believes a Cup championship should be an automatic ticket to the Hall of Fame. And even Lee Petty's son, the king of stock car racing, Richard Petty, is also on record saying he believes Rexford belongs in the Hall. Who am I to argue against racing royalty? Maybe Rexford gets that call to the Hall of Fame one day. But regardless of whether or not that happens, what did happen to Lee Petty in 1950 serves as evidence that as flawed as NASCAR's playoff system is today, well, worse ways to determine a champion do in fact exist. Thanks for watching.
Who's number 4? And Alabama returns to the playoff.
Hell no! No! No!